Have you ever created a new Minecraft world, determined that this was the one, played it for a few hours, got bored, left the game, and never touched it again? Survival games can be brutal. That's often the whole appeal. Desperation, starvation, exposure, hostility, you're never safe or secure. In comparison, Minecraft is relatively painless. Hunger is a non-issue, shields make you nearly invincible, and gathering resources is as simple as mining stone in a straight line while you watch YouTube. This is no secret. Whether or not you see that as an issue, it's the way things are, have been, and probably will be for a long time. However, it's becoming increasingly apparent as the years go on that survival is losing almost all of its original challenge, which can quickly lead to a dull, soulless experience. Of course, some players stave off boredom by creating massive megastructures or whatever Let's Players are up to nowadays. But I believe Minecraft's definitive game mode, and possibly the community as a whole, is in jeopardy. First, it's essential to go into more detail about how and why survival mode is easier than it should be. When you start a new world, there is a clear path towards completing the base game. Villages will guarantee you stacks of food and enough iron to breeze through the early game in a few minutes. And if you spend enough time with the villagers, their trades can become incredibly overpowered. Hostile mobs do not pose a substantial threat once you understand their behavior either, and let's just say their AI isn't going to be taking over the world anytime soon. Really, I could give countless examples, like how the boss battles are underwhelming and almost everything from potatoes to iron can be farmed automatically at an industrial scale. Many of the more recent updates have also been content designed for the late game, or only really exist to help you get to the end as fast as possible, such as shipwrecks or piglin trading. Mojang's primary design focus has always centered around giving the player as much freedom as possible. While this allows you to work on grandiose projects without worry, it's been at the cost of something else. So let's travel back to a period before Minecraft was easy. Minecraft's early development is well remembered by many, and a major factor is simply because of how different it was. Not just at a visual level, but the fundamental gameplay philosophy itself was the polar opposite of what we currently have. During the alpha phase, ore generation was far less common, meaning anything from coal to diamonds took far more time to acquire. Tools were about half as durable as they are now, and there were no enchantments. Armor also worked differently, but long story short, it just sucked. One of the more noticeable differences is the lack of sprinting and hunger, which makes running away from mobs problematic. Oh, and mobs. I think this clip tells you everything you need to know. Oh my god. These earlier versions were far harder, slower paced, and slightly more grounded. Please note that I'm not claiming that the old versions are objectively better. They clearly weren't in many regards. However, this restriction, not just with the extra challenge, but also a far smaller block and item palette, induces a psychological effect called creative limitation, which paradoxically gives you the drive to innovate and overcome challenges. As a result, players built thousands of extraordinary creations, from a scale model of the Earth, to Star Destroyers and a 16-bit ALU using only redstone dust and torches. What actually is an ALU? No clue, but it does look really cool. Despite being smaller in scale than many average builds now, you can't help but find these more impressive in a weird way. Over time, new updates have added features that let survival mode players automate resource collection and upgrade their tools and armor, allowing them to transcend their original limitations. However, there have been few, if any, changes that have genuinely made the game more challenging. I've yet to explain why this is a problem, and truthfully, the status quo isn't necessarily bad. However, some notable downsides must be acknowledged. Replayability is a vital component to the success of contemporary games, and Minecraft, on paper, excels in this regard. You can be a redstone engineer, design grand megabases, wander from village to village trading as you go along, move to the nether, live off the land in a cozy cottage, or exploit it for every last block. But as Minecraft turns 14 years old, the gameplay loop is starting to feel stale, and when the speedrunning community took off, I realized the game is far more linear than we had thought. The primary culprit of this linearity is the end. Back during the release of 1.0, Giving a game meant to have no goals a main questline was a controversial decision, and it does not help that the journey is painfully straightforward. Step 1, get to the nether once you have a diamond pickaxe or bucket of water. Step 2, collect blaze rods and fortresses, and ender pearls from piglin or warped forest. Step 3, locate the stronghold, then activate the end portal. Defeating the ender dragon is necessary for most, because while there's technically nothing forcing you to finish the game, you'll be locked away from most of the late game content and set back significantly compared to players that do. The issue is not the concept of an end itself, it's that you're only compelled to go there so you can yoink an elytra and set up XP farms. So, despite freeing the end, there are no consequences or stakes, nothing in the world will be affected, and this monotonous grind to finish the game leads to my next point. The beginning is the end. Any time you spend before that is wasted, because it takes longer to put mid-roll ads on a YouTube video than to demonetize the ender dragon. So while there is already plenty to explore in the early game, players will always choose the path of least resistance, ignoring most of the content entirely. This leads us to the woodland mansions, fascinating structures that act as the only dungeons found on the surface. They were developed and playtested for mid-game players, and offer loot that could be useful in boss fights, but they are exceptionally rare, require a confusing locating process, and are usually around 10,000 blocks away from your spawn point. Meanwhile, strongholds are 10 times closer, so it would be far faster to go to the end, get an elytra, and fly to a mansion. But by that point, you've already got maxed out gear, so why bother if there won't be any challenge or reward worth your time? This brings us to Steve, Alex, or any of these folks you'll never use. The player is a total rejection of one of the most standard practices in game development. Generally, when you first dive into a digital world, you start out weak and relatively powerless, forced to work your way up from nothing, using new equipment, items, and upgrades to eventually become a magnitude stronger than when you began. This is an appealing playstyle, as it gives you a sense of genuine progression and improvement. Contrarily, Steve starts out stronger than most late game protagonists, able to punch a cubic meter of stone faster than you can open those stupid plastic containers, effortlessly carrying an inconceivable amount of material in their back pocket, and eating enough steaks to feed an American for a day just so they can go on a full-on sprint for hours without getting tired. The player starts out powerful, and they will only get stronger. Once you've secured mending elytras, enchanted netherite armor, tools, and have countless resource farms set up, you've gone far past being powerful and are now effectively a god. This process is fun and a shakeup of the standard gameplay formula. Still, there is a lot of potential enjoyment lost. Survival mode often feels more like creative with resource management. Speaking of which, while there are many underdeveloped aspects caused by years of neglect, game modes and difficulty settings in particular are the most relevant. It's still impossible to beat the game on peaceful, despite the ender dragon being coded to spawn. Meanwhile, the main difficulty modes all have changes so minor that you are unlikely to ever notice a difference. However, improving this shallow and outdated part of Minecraft could allow for many of the previously stated issues to be solved in one fell swoop. To fix the issues brought up in this video, I'm introducing Okay, I'm gonna be honest, I spent like 10 minutes trying to think of a fun name for this proposed update, but screw it. We'll just add bundles and call it Caves and Cliffs Part 5. The focus would be to drastically change the way game modes work, expand the early game experience, and give players more freedom to play how they want. Currently, there are 5 game modes: Creative, Survival, Hardcore, Adventure, and Spectator. The former and latter are fine, but the ones in between need improvement. As mentioned previously, Survival is effectively creative with resource management, so the current implementation should be renamed to something like Classic, so that those who prefer a more casual experience still get to enjoy it. Survival in its new state would be a far more challenging experience. The durability of tools and armor gets cut in half, and mobs have fewer drops, while ores, structures, and loot chests become rare. For item upgrades, the best enchantments become more expensive to acquire. Fireworks don't boost elytras, netherite follows the same crafting recipe as other ores, and I'm sorry, but mending has to go. It just makes way too much of the game redundant. Finally, instead of strongholds generating 1,000 blocks from spawn, they're 25,000 blocks away. These may seem like some significant disadvantages, but it grounds the player while inviting adventure, forcing creative solutions to problems, and giving a new reason to work on infrastructure projects. The game would be considerably slower, and the player would feel much smaller, but greater challenges reap grander rewards. Netherite could be buffed to compensate for its new sheer difficulty acquiring. Enchantments could have a higher level cap, and with enough time you could eventually obtain Protection 6 armor or a Fortune 5 pickaxe. The increased distance of end portals would give woodland mansions a reason to exist, as well as be an excellent opportunity to add a few more environmental storytelling structures and promote nether travel to take advantage of the interdimensional warp. Although Mojang would need to make minecarts faster, these things suck. Now, how would hardcore fit into all of this? Well, it's not technically a game mode. If that doesn't make any sense, it's because Minecraft Java has been haphazardly coded for 14 years and nothing can be consistent or efficient. So why not make it a toggleable difficulty that can be enabled during world creation? While on the subject, Mojang could do far more with easy, normal, and hard. While specifically adding special features to each is quite challenging, you could add modifiers to fishing luck, loot chest, hunger or saturation given by food, mob health, damage effects, boss fights, as well as other elements. It would be neat to have a custom difficulty mode that lets you change all these factors as well. I'm sure someone would be insane enough to beat the game on hardcore mode with no natural regeneration, while all mobs have 10 times normal health. If you help me reach 100,000 subscribers, I might even do that. But how do we solve Peaceful Mode's problem? As mentioned earlier, you're only able to beat the game if you've got dream level luck. And while trying to figure out how to solve this issue, I realized something. You can get to the Nether through 3 different methods. There is a multitude of modes to travel, and an infinite amount of ways to do just about everything else. So why should the main questline be so linear in the first place? We already know it's a complete betrayal of Minecraft's central theme. The solution is simple: add more paths to get to the end. There's the primary method, of course, but it'd be interesting to have a pacifist method that can be completed in peaceful, through trading, crafting, or a more complex system I don't have time to go over. The mysterious skulk and its likely dimension could also be involved in its own path, which opens the door for post-game consequences. Beating the game could lead to different endings, depending on how you do it. One where the Endermen become friendly to the player, or hostile depending on your actions. Perhaps the skulk ending could infect the entire dimension, creating more powerful and dangerous mobs with amazing loot. Wait, hold up, this is a video about Minecraft being too easy. How did we get here? As I wrote the script for this video, I realized the feeling that the game had gotten dull was not just from a single factor. There was, of course, the lack of tribulation, the antithetical design flaw of the Ender Dragon fight, but also simply the fact I've played the game for well over a decade. I, and many others, will never be able to go back to a time when everything was completely foreign and confusing. Regardless, I still believe that these changes would make survival mode fun again for many people. But do you feel the same way? Be sure to tell me in the comments down below. A special thanks goes out to my patrons, particularly for sticking around despite this very long hiatus. Trash Never Dies, Autumn, Caucasian Crustacean, MKJ, Hungry, Stars, Gobi Bago, QuarkFox, Aquatic Nacho, Lim, and Downloadable Fox. If you'd be interested in supporting the channel, a link to my Patreon can be found below. Tiers start at $5 US, and all perks are the same. If you'd like to help out in another way, even just leaving a like helps a ton. Anyways, if you enjoyed this video, I think you'd also want to watch How Mojang Ruined the Best Minecraft Update. I'll see y'all in the next video.